Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan has warned against corruption and what he calls a rise of a counter-revolutionary force, especially during the last elections. Gordhan was speaking at the second day of the National Union of Mineworkers National Policy Conference underway in Ekurhuleni. The formation of a government of national unity and coalition talks dominated discussions at the gathering yesterday.
Are we seeing in some form the rise of a counter-revolutionary force in this country, with all the disruptions that are going on, and the threats that are going on, and the potential violence that is being threatened as well, is a question we need to ask ourselves. In that context, how do we locate the rise of populism and authoritarian tendencies, both in South Africa but also globally as well? We've all seen what's happened in Europe over the past weekend, where right-wing parties are increasing their votes in virtually every European country. Wait until the American elections come, and what will we see then? And what does that mean for the kind of political context that we might have for the next 4 or 5 years, globally speaking? And how do we respond to that so that the progressive trajectory is not lost, not just in South Africa, but globally as well?
Now, staying with that, our reporter Nqobile Madlala is tracking those developments, who joins us live from Boksburg. Nqobile, very good afternoon to you, and thank you for this update. Just, we heard from the Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan, but we also heard from the Electricity Minister, Nqobile, speaking of strategic setbacks and also speaking of the just energy transition. What more have the ministers been saying at that conference?
Well, really, if you look at it, it's a reflection in terms of how the ministers have contributed into what these unions are concerned about. So standing in the podium, they all have to look back in terms of what they have contributed. If you listen to Pravin Gordhan, he speaks about state capture and how that has also impacted unemployment and so on, of how industries have been impacted because of state capture. And he said it was time to also look back and see if state capture has not changed, and because he says it continues in other departments. And at the same time, we had the electricity minister also standing up, looking at how the coal industry in South Africa, which is a major concern for a lot of mine workers, how that is going to continue to either grow or shrink. And this is a major issue for mine workers because that affects directly their work. And already you will understand that the major concern from yesterday was that the retrenchments that they spoke about said that it takes away from their work, but also at the same time it takes away really from the society at large, because there are many families that are affected when one person is retrenched. And I want to bring in now the Minister of Electricity to speak to us about such issues. Minister, we know that the first thing is that the miners want to know if the coal industry will continue. Will it?
Oh yes, I mean, if you look at the integrated resource plan, which is our comprehensive articulation of how we are going to meet demand, what those energy sources are, coal is part of it. But what we're going to do is that there's going to be an accelerated exponential rise in the share of renewables in the energy mix, because we do accept the science that suggests that there's a correlation between the intensity of the emissions and also issues of climate change, which is devastating the poor. But yes, to your question, yes, coal is still part of the energy mix. I mean, there is no country that is run on renewable. The anchor and the backbone of energy generation will still be base load. What is base load is coal, is gas, it's nuclear, and it's hydro. As we increase the capacity of renewables so that there's a balance in our energy mix.
And I heard you speak about how this has affected the Mpumalanga vote, though. There's obviously an issue around coal that people have not understood.
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean, if you look at what has been the situation before, if you like, in the public domain, the suggestion that there's going to be a rapid closure or decommissioning of this coal-fired power station. I think the point we've been making, and we've succeeded to prevail, is that yes, we're committed to the nationally determined contribution, the greening of generation in our country. So that's non-negotiable. Like I said, science has proven that we need to go that direction. But for as long as you have not resolve the issues. How best are you going to substitute the decommission capacity? It's important that you continue with generating and exploiting this resource that is coal. The second point that we are making is that if you find solutions on carbon capture, on clean coal, because your problem is not necessarily the energy source, it's not the coal. It's a consequence of burning that coal to generate the electricity, the emissions. We know, working with the Council for Geoscience, they are doing some pilot studies, carbon capture, clean coal. Once we are able to find that those technologies, they are efficacious, so they give the kind of results that you want, and they are also commercially viable. So I'm sure it's something that we are going to exercise ourselves so that we continue to exploit this endowment whilst illustrating to the rest of the world in the most practical terms that you are not increasing emissions, and if anything, you are increasing the share of renewables so that there's a balance in our energy mix in the country.
And now going forward, what does this mean though for the miners? Because there's also a set of skills that needs to come when you move towards the renewables. They're in the mining industry. What does this mean because of the retrenchments that we've seen? What does this mean for their work?
So when you talk about a just energy transition, that just element talks to the skills, talks to the transitioning, the fact that the net employment effect must be zero, or if anything, positive at best. So what that means is that where we're standing, Eskom must participate in clean, renewable energy sources. So Eskom can't be known just to be either an off-taker, a buyer of clean technologies, but Eskom must participate in that space. Eskom has got an advantage. You go to Lephalale, you go to the areas of Mpumalanga, the irradiation level, the quality of the sun is still better than most parts of Europe. So you have that resource. The second resource that they have is the land, the real estate, where these mines are constructed. There's huge tracts of land, so you are resolving the land question. The third one is that there's a grid capacity. Because you are exporting, evacuating what you are generating, if you switch to another energy source, you still have that grid capacity. What Eskom doesn't have is the capital that is required for you to make that transition. And that's why I'm saying it satisfies 3 of the 4 requirements for that transition to happen. As you do that transition, you are not going to kill the economies of those spaces, because those communities rely on those coal-fired power stations, on the mine. As you transition to cleaner sources, you are still doing it in situ. So those opportunities are located there, and therefore the net gain from an employment point of view at West is zero, at best is positive.
Thank you very much for speaking to us. That is the Minister of Electricity in the Presidency. As you can hear there, he's explaining to us that, of course, the change does not mean that people will be losing jobs. Rather, there's going to be change in terms of skills and also an upgrade in terms of the work that is currently being done, as they have already seen the effect this has in communities.
Nqobile Madlala, thank you so much for that report.